Welcome back to this week's edition of Halftime on the Hudson. My name is Matt Spirio, and today we got a lot of news around the sports world. We got a fun game show segment, and we got news from Marist Center Field. So stay strapped in there because we got the next half hour of good fun coming to you live from Studio A in Lowell Thomas. This is Halftime on the Hudson. I'm Matt Spirio.
And I'm Fio Walker. And let's get into the news.
The Cowboys and Dak Prescott agreed to a new record-breaking $160 million contract earlier this week. His $66 million signing bonus, an expected $75 million that he will make in 2021, as well as a $95 million guaranteed at signing are all NFL records. Prescott was leading the NFL in passing before he tore his ACL in Week 5 this past season, and he has a 42-27 career record in his 5 years with the Cowboys. This is a good move for both the Cowboys and Dak. It's a team-friendly deal that will allow them to convert a lot of the money into signing bonus in the later years, as well as guarantee a lot of money for Prescott. Dak has undergone a lot of flack in his years as the Cowboys starter, but he's appeared in 3 playoff games. He's 1-2, and he should be their franchise quarterback moving forward.
Speaking of NFL contracts, this year they recently set their salary cap at $182.5 million. That's 8% down from last year's $198.2 million. It is all due to the revenue loss occurred from the pandemic. This gives general managers less money to pay highly ranked free agent NFL athletes this year, leaving them to contemplate recruiting more rookie players on their teams. Artemir Panarin returned to practice this week for the Rangers, 2 weeks after taking a personal leave of absence due to the allegations of a physical altercation with a woman. The NHL is still investigating the altercations, but the return of Panarin to the lineup is a happy sight to see for the Rangers, who went 4-4 during his absence. The runner-up to the MVP last season, Panarin will look to guide the Rangers back into the playoff picture when he makes his return.
In college basketball news, Gonzaga defeated BYU on Tuesday night to cap off the 20th undefeated regular season in college basketball history. The last time a team entered the NCAA tournament undefeated was Kentucky in 2016, but they ended up losing in the Final Four. The Zags are looking to become the first undefeated national champion since the Indiana Hoosiers in 1976. On a typical year, Gonzaga comes in, they're kind of slept on, they play weak competition, but this year feels a little bit different. They're the highest scoring team in the country, they're incredibly deep, they have 3 scorers in double figures. And of the 19 previous undefeated teams that have made the NCAA tournament, they've averaged at least a Final Four appearance. The Zags should be considered the favorite and should expect to win multiple games. And lastly, in NBA news, the NBA will return for its second half of the regular season after this week's All-Star weekend. A typically non-controversial weekend, Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell were the last picks in the All-Star draft. So there's going to be a lot going on between the Jazz, the Lakers, a lot of these big Western Conference teams that'll certainly shape the second half of the season. Over in the Eastern Conference, Blake Griffin is signing with the Nets, which should be a very big story considering the Nets are considered the best team in the East. They already were a super team. While Blake Griffin is not in his prime, he will certainly add a veteran presence to that locker room. And lastly, and maybe the most controversial story, was Myers Leonard making anti-Semitic comments this past weekend while playing Call of Duty on a stream. These are inexcusable comments, and the Heat have pretty much banned him from the team, and he will be away from the team for a while. That concludes our news stories, and we will be moving over to our Hot Take game show segment next. What's up, guys? I'm Matt Spirio, and I am back here with a new segment of Prove Your Point, a best of 3 debate game show. Tonight, our contestants are Nick and Zach, who will be debating topics across all sports. Our first debate of the night. Who is the more attractive quarterback available on the trade market? Russell Wilson or Desean Watson? Nick, I'm going to take it with you first.
Sounds good. So, to me, the answer to this question, I'm going with the proven commodity. I'm going with the success. It's Russell Wilson, the guy that's been there, done that, won a Super Bowl year after year, brings his team to the playoffs, and leads them in playoff runs. He could have had 2 Super Bowls if it weren't for the Malcolm Butler interception against the Patriots a few years ago. And this is a guy who has been extremely durable throughout his career as well. You look throughout his entire span of his time in the league. He has played 160 straight games both postseason and regular season. This guy is in week in and week out. And let's not act like he's been backpacked to his success either. The Legion of Boom has slowly been dismantled year in and year out to now it's the point where it's pretty much a mediocre defense at best. When was the last time this offensive line was relevant? And when you look back to last year, arguably the best division in football in the NFC West, he still had his Seahawks on top in that division. This is a guy where throughout his entire career with Seattle, there's never been a time when the Seahawks weren't relevant. And if you're going to bring in a guy that you want immediate success right now, if you want to have the Super Bowl locked within your sights, you go out and you get Russell Wilson.
All right, some great points there, Nick. Zach, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I'm actually have to go the different way. I'm going to go with Desean Watson. So I'm going to start off with Desean Watson, 7 years younger. So when you're making a trade for a franchise quarterback, you want a guy who can be there longer. Desean Watson's just 25. Russell Wilson's 32. Desean Watson this year, despite having no offensive talent around him because Houston traded everyone out, he threw for the most yards in the league this season, by far the most yards in the league. His turnover rate compared to Russell Wilson was also extremely down. He only threw 7 picks to Russell Wilson's 14. So Russell Wilson has been turnover prone. He was right next to Carson Wentz up there. And Desean Watson, when he had DeAndre Hopkins and he had talent around them, he brought them as far as he could. He had a 24 points up on the Chiefs before the defense couldn't hold it. So Desean Watson has proven, just like Russell Wilson, that he can be successful. And if you give him a good situation, say like the Dolphins, then he could be loaded and take them to the Super Bowl right away.
You guys both brought up some great points there. It's a tough one for me. I am going to have to side with Nick on this one. I think Wilson is not only the better person to trade for, but I think, Nick, you made some great arguments there. So I'm going to give you the first point here. Our next debate topic, we got a couple of rotations here in New York. The New York Yankees, the New York Mets. Who do you guys think has the best starting rotation going into this season? Zach, we're going to start with you this time.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to have to say the Mets, and I don't really think it's particularly close. Up top on the Mets, we have Jacob deGrom, who's probably the best pitcher, not probably, definitely the best pitcher in baseball. And then right behind them, the Mets have built some nice depth. Marcus Stroman, former All-Star. They just signed Taijuan Walker this offseason to come fill another void. Carlos Carrasco, who's extremely underrated. His ERA is right in line with Trevor Bauer for his career, and Trevor Bauer is regarded as one of the top pitchers in baseball. The Mets have also built some depth underneath that they haven't had in years past with David Peterson, who's a solid rookie last year. And then we have Joey Lucchesi and Jordan Yamamoto also riding in the wing. And with the Yankees, there's so much question marks. Garrett Cole, he's obviously a stud. He had a rough year last year, but he's still a stud. And then right after that, Jamison Tyone, Corey Kluber, both guys coming off arm injuries, haven't pitched in 2 years. And then you have Domingo Hermann, who he hasn't pitched in 2 years. Luis Severino also hasn't pitched in 2 years. So the Yankees, outside of maybe Deivi Garcia, who's still young, they only have one guy they can really rely on. So I think the Mets up and down are much stronger.
A lot of great points there, Zach. And Nick, what you got to say to that?
I'm tired of this Yankee slander, man. Every year it's the same thing. Mets rotation is so good. If we're going to talk about Yankees question marks, I want to see the same question marks on the Mets side. Garrett Cole, I get it. Jacob deGrom may be better. Garrett Cole, easily a top 5 pitcher in my mind in Major League Baseball. Outside of that, they just brought in Corey Kluber, Jamison Tyone, both guys who have had injury history, but they have something to prove. If one of them can stay healthy, then that's going to be a huge boost for this rotation. Outside of that, we're talking about Domingo Hermann, who only missed a 60-game season. And prior to that, he was, 18-4 at the start of the 2019 season before he went down with that suspension. Jordan Montgomery behind there, Deivi Garcia, who has just as much experience as David Peterson, frankly, and Luis Severino is also going to be coming back, who's dealing with the same injury as Noah Syndergaard. So when you ask me which team has more question marks, maybe the Yankees have 1 or 2 more, but the Yankees also have 1 or 2 more depth options. I think that depth is key. That's something that the Mets don't have because outside of Syndergaard, it's Stroman who didn't pitch last year because he opted out. It's David Peterson who's coming into his second season. It's Carlos Carrasco who's already injured in spring training. It's Noah Syndergaard who's down with Tommy John. To me, there's just as many question marks for the Mets, and the Yankees have more depth.
Another great debate here, you guys. I got to say, as myself, a lifelong Yankee fan, I would love to side with Nick, but I think Zach's got the edge here. I think the Mets are a little stronger coming into this season, and I think he proved it there, which means that we're going to go into the best 2 words in sports, round 3. Which conference is the college basketball national champion most likely to come out of Nick, we're going to start with you for this one. Game on
And
the line.
I
we
will
go.
be going with the Big Ten, the conference that on the line I would want to be picking as the conference most likely to have a champion in the NCAA tournament come out of. This is a conference throughout the entire college basketball season has had teams constantly ranked inside the AP top 25, constantly in the top 10 of that poll, and it's only continued right now. 3 teams inside the top 5, all looking at possible 1 or 2 seeds in this tournament. We could talk about how the Big 12 has potentially more depth. You've got teams like Oklahoma and Texas Tech who are just barely inside the top 25. You could say maybe they're relevant, but outside of Baylor, what other team in that conference it has a realistic shot to get to the NCAA finals as a team like Iowa, as a team like Illinois, as a team like Michigan? That Big Ten conference is stacked with top tier talent, and while the Big 12 may be deeper, I see that top tier talent in the Big Ten as more valuable. And if you also want to talk about some of the teams that maybe aren't getting as much attention, a team like Michigan State, who's been surging of late, who knows if they can make a Cinderella run? A team like Ohio State, who has struggled recently against conference foes, but also to this point could catch fire and still be a very relevant team. This conference has been better all year, and I think that it is more likely that the NCAA tournament champion comes out of the Big Ten.
Zach, your final words here.
Yeah, I have to strongly disagree. I go with the Big 12. I also strongly disagree with the fact that the Big 10's been better this season. They have actually matched up out of the conference this year, and Baylor played Illinois earlier this year, and Illinois is playing like the best team in the Big 10, and Baylor smacked them around for the entire game and won by 20. And I just think that the Big 12 in total is deeper. They have 7 teams currently ranked inside the AP top 25, which is a ridiculous rate. We have teams at the top like Baylor, who's a veteran team. They got guards Jared Butler, Davion Mitchell, who are proven and able to lead Baylor, who's a legit championship contender. Right behind them is West Virginia, who's loaded with guys like Taz Sherman and Derek Culver. Culver's huge inside. West Virginia almost took Gonzaga down earlier this season, who hasn't lost yet this season. And then right below it, you have teams like Kansas, who took down Baylor. Kansas is always good. You have Texas Tech, who's loaded with players like Mac McClung, who's known for clutch. And just the last NCAA tournament, they were an overtime away from a championship. You have Texas, who is finally surging with veteran guards like Jones and Ramey. I think the Big 12 in total, also Oklahoma ranked in stab, and Oklahoma State, you can't forget about with Cade Cunningham, who's looking like a player of the year contender. I just think from the top down, what they've done in conference play and out of conference play, I trust those 7 teams because all 7 teams are currently one of the top 25 teams, and I could see multiple teams making the Final Four out of the Big 12.
That is a lot of great points you brought up there, Zach. And you as well, Nick, to be honest. I am going to have to make a tough decision on this one. Going to keep my personal bias out of it. Just go based on the arguments that I've heard you today. I am going to pick our winner, Zach. Congratulations, man. It's it's a prestigious honor to win. Prove your point here. Anything you'd like to say?
Well, yeah, I know. I just had to come get revenge because, I came on here once last year and I took that loss, and pretty emphatic loss. So came on here and the come from behind victory, nothing better.
It's a tough lead one there by Nick, but I'm sure we'll be seeing him. I'm sure we'll be seeing him back here one day.
I'll be back. All right. Congrats, Zach. I'll be back.
Thank you guys very much for joining me here today. We got one last segment coming up next with Marist Center Field, but really appreciate you guys for stopping in and playing a little prove your point with us today.
Thank you, Matt. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, you guys as well. Be good. All right, guys, welcome back. We are now going to finish up tonight with some Marist sports stories. For starters, lacrosse started both men's and women this past week. Fia, what can you tell me about what went on over there?
What can I say? Things are off to a great start for the Marist lacrosse teams. Both the men and women Red Foxes brought home wins in their season opening games. The men's team was number 1 in the preseason rankings, but in their first season opener, they came out with a victory of 15-11 against the Detroit Mercies, who was second in place in the preseason rankings, as well as the Fox top competitor for the past few years now. They took home this win with only 5 days of practice before their first game. The women's team also only had 5 days to practice to get ready for their game against Manhattan College, who had way more prep time than the Foxes. Yet, they still came on top with a 9-7 win. Congratulations to both our female and male Foxes on their successful season openers. Can't wait to see what else they bring this season.
Yeah, it was an awesome start from Marist Lacrosse. Both come away with a couple of big wins.
Definitely.
Unfortunately, the same could not be said about volleyball. What happened over there?
Oh, well, let's talk about volleyball. The season is starting, but not on the right foot. Over the weekend, the women's volleyball team was stung by a doubleheader loss to Iona in the season opening games. Their first game plan was to play mainly freshmen and sophomores in the first game day, but lost 3-0. The senior Foxes were set to play the most on the second day, but they still couldn't pull out a win and suffered another team loss with a score of 3-1. To be fair, the team only had about 6 days to practice before the first game, so let's hope the Foxes will have more luck this season.
Yeah, they're definitely going to need a little bit of help over there on volleyball, but we have one last great story to close out the night. What's going on with Marist men's basketball?
Basketball, as the season is starting to come to an end, the men's basketball team is fighting their way to the top as they clinch the fourth place in the victory against Quinnipiac in the MAC tournament. It was a struggle in the first half because the team only produced shots at 37% from the field and 15.4% from the three. They kept up their defense and held the Bobcats down despite the Foxes' out-of-sync offense, and closed the first half with the Bobcats' lead of 24-22. With the start of the second half, the Foxes found their flow in the offensive end and kept up their good defense they had in the first half. They closed out the game with the win of against Quinnipiac 65-52 and will be back in action on March 11th.
Yeah, it's been a great big turnaround for Marist basketball this season. They couldn't even make the quarterfinals last year, and just a year later, they've clinched their way into a first-round bye. It's an awesome turnaround, and I'm sure they're only going to get better in years to come. Well, that concludes our Marist sports stories. Faya, thank you very much for delivering those. That's pretty much all we have for tonight. I just want to thank you guys for spending your evening with us here. I'm going to close out with a few remarks just in terms of where we're at right now. It was about a year ago in a day that we were all in this studio on a night where we kind of found out the sports world was coming to an end and things were happening very quickly, live right in front of our eyes. And a year today, we've moved very far beyond that. And it's we really appreciate you guys for bearing with us through our Zoom segments, our virtual things that we have to do, and hopefully we'll be able to deliver some more conventional news going forward. With that being said, I'm Matt.
And I'm Faya.
And this has been Halftime on the Hudson.